So who would like to live a long time? All right, good. Some hands are going up. That's encouraging. If your hands didn't go up, we have lots of school counselors here who I'm sure would be happy to talk to you. I think, honestly, having traveled all over the place, if you ask humans from any political persuasion, culture, or walk of life, what do you really want? I bet everybody would come up with, I want my kids to have a decent chance at a long, healthy, happy life. I bet there is agreement about that. They may differ about what they think those kids need for their best chance at a long, healthy, happy life, but there would at least be some agreement on the goal. And I do get to wear a few different hats. I gave you a very brief Ojibwe language introduction. My native name is Wagush, which means fox. I come from the Eagle clan. My family comes from Leech Lake, but also White Earth. My mother was actually enrolled at White Earth. And I've been thinking about some of the hats I wear. I'm a historian. I do a lot of research, but I'm also an educator. I do lots of work in K-12, but I do work in higher ed too. Through my explorations, I've run into a lot of Native people who lived a remarkably long life. One, the late Archie Mosé, made it to 96 years, which today is not completely radical, but is still a pretty good run. And I had finished high school with a plan to get out of town and never come back. And I finished college with a plan to come home and never leave. And I ended up finding this guy who had been born in 1901. He was 12 years old the first time he ever saw a white man. That was an American experience. He was in his 30s the first time he saw a black man or a car. And when I saw him, he was in a little modern house watching WWF SmackDown and, laughing really loud. Even his children, some of whom are still alive today, were born in wigwams. There are still people amongst us who were born in a wigwam. That sometimes surprises people because we are talking about AI and stuff like that, but things change fast. He had a friend from the neighboring tribe, a Ho-Chunk, also sometimes referred to as Winnebago, but Ho-Chunk elder, who ended up making it to 102 years old, and he had the very appropriate name, Jim Funmaker. And he was still driving at 102 years, and he would get pulled over by the cops, and he would tell the cop, "Boy, you look at my license, you see how old I am? I have to speed. I might die before I get there." And the cop would laugh and let him go, And I thought, on so many levels, looking at Archie and some of these other elders that I knew, like, what a beautiful life. To be surrounded by children and grandchildren, to be able to contribute, to the community in ceremony. And the older one becomes in Native space, it's like the more important and relied upon you become. Our word for an elder, Gitchiaya'a, literally means a great being. And I thought, this is the goal, all right? The biggest flex is getting there in terms of longevity. And there were so many other people that I found, both historical, like Chief Buffalo and so forth, and some that were making it well over 100 years. Noden Wind, who was actually the Grand Marshal for the 4th of July parade in Bemidji in 1976 on its 200th anniversary, and he had lived through half of America's first 200 years. Pretty cool, And there were other folks too, like Gagige Gijik, who, if his birth records had been documented, would be the world record holder for human longevity. Or John Smith, who lived in 3 centuries, born in the late 1700s and died in 1922. The official record holder is this woman from France, who made it to 122 years. And it's really a matter of documentation as much as anything else. They had to know something. I was reading some books, and these are books by non-Indigenous authors that are exploring different dimensions of human longevity. Some of them were really contrarian. I just finished Outliers, which I really, really liked. Among other things, really comes to the conclusion that those that we think of as outliers, dynamic achievers in so many different realms, are really the beneficiaries of dynamic circumstances more than such exceptional talent. It's the environment and then our decisions on how we navigate that. But there are others to outlive, which is not just talking about eat right and exercise. And then there's the big Harvard study, longitudinal study about happiness, where they caught people and followed them throughout their lives, interviewing them and taking health data at every single year throughout their journeys, which is very different than asking someone to reflect upon a long life. All of those books and everything I saw from these Native folks that I was studying and researching pointed to the same things. That health is positively impacted by eat right and exercise, but also very heavily depends on the health of relationships. And relationships can come in any number of forms. Can be a healthy marriage, can be relationships with children, grandchildren, friends, community, so many different ways that it can be delivered. But relational health is directly correlated to longevity. And all of the data supports that from multiple perspectives. We're also at a time where the broader meta culture emphasizes individualism, competition, and materialism, which are at odds with our greatest human yearnings. Back to caveman days, we survived cave bears and saber-toothed tigers not because we outcompeted the person in the next cave or acquired more resources than them. We survived those things because the person in the next cave loved us. And they would intervene if we were in trouble. We are hardwired to need connection, belonging, and love. And we are told in our educational space to enculturate people for individual attainment, materialism, and competition. By the way, it doesn't mean that there isn't a value to sports competitions and things like that. There is. But we do need relational health. And there is an opportunity in our educational space to generate and enculturate that, to provide healthy examples of that, and to equip our kids with tools, not just for critical thinking, but for relational health. Native folks are struggling with regard to longevity today. And by the way, this is right out of the census, aggregated data. Natives have the lowest longevity among disaggregated racial groups, but that doesn't even tell you everything. Because 70% of the native population lives off reservation, and when you start trying to disaggregate, urban, reservation, rural, enrolled tribal citizenry, everybody else who self-identifies, you'll start seeing some breakdowns, and it's never been properly studied, although there are smaller local and regional studies. I almost hesitate to show a little bit about Pine Ridge because they get picked on so much. But a life expectancy for men of 48 and for women at 52. And they tell you to save money for retirement. There's a complexity to the data, and I'm not giving you a comprehensive view. And I got to say something here too, and this is, a sidebar, but it's pertinent. We are also enculturated to paternalism and pity when we think about the Native experience. Oh, those poor people. And then we see a slide like that and we think, those poor people. But the reality is that, as is the case with all humans, it is complex. And I can see that although my research, and we don't have great data on human longevity, before they were doing a US census or things like that, I can see lots of evidence that Native people had access to healthy living. But colonialism, which is about taking one language, culture, and religion and using it to supplant others, has caused tremendous damage. Residential boarding schools, I'm not going to give you history lessons today, but dang, schools that kept cemeteries for kids.